And if you've never planted or grown greens like that in a small raised bed, you might not realize just how much food you can grow. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all you are having an awesome day. It is Thursday, September 25th here in South Georgia, and I am 84.63% confident that this is the last really hot day we're gonna have. I think it was 94, 95 yesterday, so it'll be 93 today, and then we look pretty cool from there on out. So given that level of confidence, we're going to go ahead and direct seed some cool season veggies in a few of these raised beds today. I'll tell you why I like some of these varieties that we're going to be planting today so much. Tell you some other things as well that you could direct seed in some of these raised beds for the fall and winter garden. But first, let's do a little recap of how we got to this point. And before we get to those round raised beds over there, everybody's been asking for an update on our fall tomatoes. You can see them right here. We've got 3 plants in that bed, 3 plants in this bed. Now, these aren't my best looking tomato plants ever, and I'll tell you why. The white flies have been really, really bad this year. I don't know if you can see them on those leaves right there. They're all over the place, and I haven't sprayed these plants. I probably should have sprayed these plants. That's why the bottoms look so rough there. The white flies have just been having a heyday on these things right here. They're still growing, they're still producing flowers. You can see we've got a few tomatoes right there. They just don't look as good as they should look because the white flies have just been feasting on these things. So we'll still get a few tomatoes off these, just probably won't be as productive as they could have been. The plants aren't as bushy as they should be at this stage in the game, but we'll take what we can get. I may spray them after it cools off a little bit, or I may just let them ride. But anyways, these 2 round raised beds right here are the ones we're going to be planting today. And a few videos ago, I showed you how we transition from some warm season stuff to getting these things ready to plant fall veggies. So we had a combination of flowers and herbs in those round raised beds from the spring all the way until late summer. And you can see our pile of debris right there. So what we do, we take our loppers or pruning shears, whatever we need, and we cut all those plants right at soil level there. Try to leave those roots in the ground if possible. Then we detach our little spider irrigation system there and put a nice heavy application of some of that Coop Grow Balanced fertilizer down. Then we top it off with some of that bed mix, which has a lot of mushroom compost in it. Fill the bed to the top, put our irrigation system back in place, and here we have a bed that's ready to plant. And one little side note about my spider setup here. So when we put all these beds together, put this whole plot together, I think it was about 4 years ago, I was showing y'all how I set this up in this round raised bed, and we had so many people telling me this is not the right way to do it. You got to do it in a spiral pattern. That's the way to do it. Well, I would argue that this is a much better way to do it because this pulls out all in one piece, so easy to remove and put back. A lot easier than if it were in a spiral pattern, and this provides plenty enough water for this entire bed, even when we're going to direct seed something as thick as we're going to direct seed it today. So if you're installing drip irrigation on a round raised bed, trust me, the spider design works way better than a spiral design. I've had those same spider setups for those round raised beds for 4 years now. I've removed them and put them back countless times. All we have to do is unhook it at the valve there. Everything comes out, everything goes back in just like that. Now, before we talk about the 2 things that we're going to direct seed in those round raised beds today, let's talk about all the different things you could direct seed in a round raised bed like that for the fall and winter garden. So we've talked a lot about transplanting and growing out transplants lately. Here we're just talking about direct seeding. So in a round raised bed like that, you could plant mustard greens, you could plant turnip greens, you could plant arugula, you could plant some of the mixed green combinations that you'll find out there, packets of those. You could plant a nice bed of leaf lettuce. You could also plant root veggies, beets, carrots, parsnips, and you could also grow a ton of spinach in just one of those 4-foot wide round raised beds. And as far as timing goes, once the temperature breaks, and it looks like it's about to break for good, not saying we still won't get some days in the mid to high 80s, but looks like we're going to be out of the 90s after today. Once that temperature breaks, you could plant most all those things I mentioned, except for the spinach. You want to wait until the soil cools down even more to plant that spinach. You're looking for soil temp in the 60s, so we won't plant any spinach until November. But the rest of those things are pretty much fair game as soon as we see that temperature break or as soon as early October rolls around. So lots of different things you can direct seed in a round raised bed for the fall garden. Today we're planting two of my favorites. One of them I grow every single year. The other one I haven't grown in a few years, but it's still one of my favorites. So in one of those beds we're going to be planting some Savannah mustard, which I believe to be hands down the best variety of mustard out there. The Savannah mustard grows really fast. Usually we can get our first harvest in about 30 to 40 days. Also has a nice upright growth habit. That means the leaves don't get very dirty. We don't have a lot of prep time between harvesting and throwing these greens in the pot. The leaves are also smooth, so even if we do get some heavy rain splashing some soil on those leaves, it doesn't get hung up in all these little crevices like it would with a curly mustard variety. And we can harvest this Savannah mustard usually 3 or 4 times throughout the cool growing season before it starts looking a little rough. So we can get a lot of food by planting this in one of those round raised beds there. Oh, and one more thing, this Savannah mustard here, really tender. You could eat it raw in a salad. Got a little bit of the mustard kick to it, but it's not spicy at all. So you can just eat it green, raw in a salad. But if you cook it down, it doesn't take it long at all to wilt it down and have you some nice greens. Now you can grow this stuff kind of 2 different ways, as baby mustard or full-grown, big, mature mustard leaves. The way we're going to be doing it today is more kind of like growing baby mustard. So we're going to plant our seeds pretty thick today, sprinkling them all over that round raised bed there. So they'll be fairly crowded, but that's what we want. We just want a complete bed full of greens. The leaves won't get that big because they'll be so crowded in there, but we like those smaller leaves. If you want larger leaves, you can transplant this stuff. You can grow out some transplants really fast, space the plants out more, and the leaves will get quite large. So you can do it either way, just depending on what you want. So we're putting the Savannah mustard in one bed, and in the other bed we're putting this all top turnip. Now as the name suggests, this variety is all top. We don't get a turnip root down there under the soil. We're just getting the greens with this variety. Now for some people that really like turnip roots, they may think that's an awful idea. Why would you want to grow something that doesn't give you that nice turnip root? But for others like me who don't really like turnip roots and just want the greens, this is a great idea because we don't have to fool with those roots down there. We're just going to get some nice delicious turnip greens that we can cut over and over again. So everybody's got their own personal preferences as far as whether they like the roots in their greens or not, or whether they like the roots at all. My father-in-law, for example, he likes mustard greens, doesn't like turnip greens, but he likes the turnip roots. So he grows mustard greens and then grows traditional turnips, doesn't eat the turnip greens, he just gets the root and then puts that in with his mustard greens. Everybody likes something different. I just personally don't really like turnip roots a whole lot. I just like the greens. That's why I like growing these. So these two, the Savannah mustard and the all top turnip, are 2 of my favorite greens that I have ever grown. Now we'll also be growing some collard greens, which I really like, but we transplant those. We don't direct seed those heavy like we'll be doing these today. We'll space out those collard greens more. Got those transplants growing in the greenhouse now. Space those out more because those plants get huge, and we'll just crop those leaves as they grow. A little different strategy with these greens right here, where we're going to plant them really thick in that raised bed. So the way we're doing this today, we don't need to make any furrows or rows in this bed here. Now if we wanted to, we could make a little furrow there and there, basically on each side of that tubing, and plant right there. But with these greens we're planting today, we can plant these things really thick. So we're not going to put them in rows, we're just going to sprinkle them over the entire bed. So I've got 500 seeds in this packet right here. Going to get started with that, sprinkling these, and we'll see how much coverage I get with this packet. We may have to use another packet, we'll just see. So I've got the seeds in my hand right there, and we're just going to start sprinkling these over the bed, much like you would sprinkle salt on a steak that you just pulled off the grill. I want to be a little heavy-handed with this, just making sure we get nice coverage there all over this bed. Alright, so I used about 1.5 packets on this bed. Probably didn't need to put down that many seeds, but I wanted to have some nice coverage here. So now all we need to do is just lightly cover these seeds with more of this bed mix. And you know what I just realized? I used the last morsel of bed mix I had on my trailer yesterday potting up some fig trees. So I don't have any more. Probably need to go get another load this afternoon. I've got something I think will work though. So I'm going to steal a little bit of bed mix from these old sweet tater mounds here. This is the same stuff, same bed mix. This right here has just been through one round of sweet tater production. Alright, so I stole a bucket full of soil from that other plot. This should be enough here. I want to make sure I get rid of any of those little bitty pieces of sweet potato in there, because those will root if I bury those. But I think this should be enough here. And to be honest, you might could get away with not covering these seeds at all if you watered them in good, or you could take a little garden tool and just kind of scratch them into the soil, rake them into the soil a little bit. I find doing this gives me a better stand of mustard greens, so we're just going to take this stuff right here and lightly sprinkle it on top of this soil here. Probably not even covering those seeds, a 1/4 inch or so, just getting a light covering of this stuff on top of it. Alright, that looks pretty good there. Since I had enough soil in my bucket, I did sprinkle enough on top to kind of barely cover these drip tubing lines here, so I guess I did plant them about a 1/4 inch deep. You just don't want to plant them too deep. I did it that way I can know I got kind of even coverage if I covered all these lines which were sitting on top of the soil. So now we just need to do the same exact thing in this bed right here, except we're planting the all-top turnip instead of the Savannah mustard, but we do it the same way. So once again, for those of you who may have dozed off when we were doing that first bed, we just lightly sprinkle these seeds over the bed here. And then we'll sprinkle just enough soil on top to kind of cover up that drip tubing, which should put these seeds around 1/4 inch deep or so. Now you notice that we didn't put down any fertilizer right before we planted those green seeds. That's because we did it back when we cleaned out and topped off those beds. So we put it down a week or two ago. That way that organic fertilizer could already be breaking down. It would be immediately available to those greens plants. Once they germinate and start growing, they should look nice and green and beautiful. So that's the preferred way to do it if you can plan ahead and remember to do it a few weeks before you plant. But even if you forget, make sure you scratch some type of fertilizer, balanced fertilizer into the soil there before you plant. That's going to give those plants a good head start. And when you're planting them as thick as we did today, you need a good little base of nutrients there. You don't have to fertilize them a lot once they get up and going, but having that kind of initial supply of nutrients really helps give you a solid bed of greens. Now I've got my drip system in place there, and we're supposed to get some rain tomorrow, but I'll probably later today come out here with an overhead nozzle and just lightly soak down those beds. That way we kind of firm everything into place there. And once we see those seeds germinate or popping up through the soil there, we'll just let the drip system do its thing. But sometimes I do like to give them a little bit of overhead water the first few days after planting, get some nice quick even coverage over the bed so all my seeds pop up at the same time. And if you've never planted or grown greens like that in a small raised bed, you might not realize just how much food you can grow in a small raised bed like that. So here's how this will work. In about 30 or 40 days, when either of those greens, the all-top turnips or the Savannah mustard, are ready to harvest, we'll cut one of them. We'll enjoy those greens that week. We can make a pretty good sized pot of greens just off, clean cut from one of those beds. Then the following week, we'll harvest the other bed and enjoy those greens. Then the next week, we might get some collard greens from our transplants that we'll put in the ground in the next week or so. And then after about 3 weeks, then those greens will be ready to harvest again. And we'll just repeat that cycle and have an endless supply of greens. So it doesn't take a whole lot of space to give you all the greens you want to eat throughout the fall and winter months. Just got to kind of plan it out right. We don't want to be cutting everything at one time. We'll harvest one bed one week, harvest the next bed the next week, kind of stagger our harvest there. That way we've always got some fresh greens out here that we can eat. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and in another month or so, once these things really get to growing or get ready to harvest, I'll be sure to show you those. You can see just how pretty they are. As always, you can find these seeds we're planting in our videos on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you can't wait a whole month to see what these look like, and you need to see what they look like right now, watch this video right here. We'll show you some of our Savannah mustard grow outs from past years. You can see just how pretty and clean and tender those greens are. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.